Hello, in this video we're going to talk about the macros in Excel and how we can use special control commands to drive the logic within the program. Specifically, we're going to use to begin with the for command, and we're going to also include later on the if command. So here you have a data set. You have 6 rows and 3 columns, and what we would like to do is to begin with just copy this information somewhere else in the spreadsheet, but we don't want to go one by one. We want to make a code that does this for us. So what we would like to do is we could have in a special cell a cell that counts how many data points we have. Of course we have 6, and we can prioritize that, say, all the way down there. So if we always start in this column, we can later on aggregate more and it should work. So cell A1 contains a number of times that we're going to have to do this. So we're going to start our macro by recording a macro. Remember, our macro does not need to contain anything at the beginning. And just stop the macro and we go directly to edit the macro here. Okay, remember we have to be in between the beginning of declaration of the macro and the end of that. And what we're going to do is we're going to just read into X the content of the first cell. The first cell is A1, right? Because that tells us how many times we will have to do this. And then we're going to go and say for I equals 1 to X, for J equals 1 to 3, and we're going to read the values in the cell into a variable. Let's say Y equals range of right at this moment we don't know where we are, but we're gonna offset that by I rows and J columns. You're gonna see that in a moment, and we're gonna read the value, and then we're gonna write the value right away. Range of set ij the value, and we're gonna go for the next J after we do that, and we're gonna go after the next I after we do that, and that's all our program. Now we need to specify which is the value for when we start the range, and if we check here, the value that we need to start with would be B1. No, would be A3. I'm sorry, A3, because the values for I and J go from 1 to 6, so that means that the first pair is 1 1. I'm going to displace from A3 1 row and 1 column to read the first number 1, and the next time I is 1 and J is 2, so that means that I displace by 1 row and then 2 columns. I will copy the name Alberto. So the cell that I need to use as my reference point is A3. So I can go, remember you can specify this in a variable, but we have A3 for the reading aspect, and then for the writing aspect I can use let's say that I want to start writing in H, so my reference point would be G3, G3 in between quotation marks, and that's the code. That should work. So if I execute my code by pressing Ctrl Q, it didn't work. Let's see, range D3. Oh, I never said what that value was going to be. That's equal to Y, right? I forgot to say, okay, what is going to happen to that value. I need to stop the code here, and it's a good thing that I had this mistake, so you can see that in order to continue with the code properly, you need to stop it first, so you reset it, and then I can come back here, Ctrl Q, and there you go. Starting on H3 and H4, because my reference point was G3, I copy all these values here. Another thing that we would like to do is to find the maximum value, and I can say the maximum value for the third column is, since I don't know what the maximum value is, it's going to be 0, and then I'm going to ask if j is equal to 3, then that means that I'm only interested in the maximum value for the third column, and if y is larger than the current maximum value, that means that that value is even larger than the last value that I found. What I want is the maximum value to be equal to y, and now the maximum value stores the largest value that we have found, and then we say end if for the first if, and then we say end if for the second if. And for purposes of readability, you don't have to do this, but for purposes of readability, we can indent a little bit our code to see where each one of these instructions begin and end with the help of the indentation. There you go. So this is easier to read in the sense that this if is associated to this end, and so on and so forth. So if I did everything right, I could print at the end of the loop the maximum value, maybe in some cell. Let's say that I want to print that. Let's say that I want to print it out in, say, B1 up there. Okay. So that's it. I should have found by then the maximum value, and when I run the code, I press Ctrl Q to run the code, and actually let me do it again, erase that part, I press Ctrl Q, you will see it running, copying the whole thing again, and checking in the third column which one was the highest value. The highest value is when, in this case, for the value of Thomas. Okay, and it only scanned the third column because we're using I for the rows and J for the column. So I hope this video explains the ifs and fors properly. This is the code again, and I think it's good enough. Remember, we're using offsets and force.